The cost of living is going through the roof, but while it may be tough on many Canadian families, a new report shows that the government is getting richer thanks to inflation. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, gas in Vancouver is $2.22 a litre. Food is going through the roof as well. Rents, but hey, the feds are making some money. How so?
Well, pretty much all governments are benefiting from this. It's not just the federal government, but there's a new report out by Desjardins Financial out of Montreal saying that this is really beneficial. And think about it. Outside of food, which doesn't have HST or GST on it, everything you buy that has the sales tax on it. And this is just one example. Everything you buy that has the sales tax on it and the price has gone up, well, the government's getting more money. So consider the price of gas. About $2 here in the Toronto area was $1.20 a year ago. That's 80 cents more per liter, and 7% of that increase is going to the federal government, or sorry, 5%. I'm dating myself with the 7% GST. 5% of every additional 80 cents is going to the federal government. So regardless of what it's doing to you and I, it's giving the government more money to spend. Unfortunately, not more money to pay down the debt, balance the books, anything like that. No, they're spending it. It was one of my big complaints about the Trudeau budget when it came out, as well as the Ford budget here in Ontario. Government spending's up, so's revenue, but the deficits are still growing, right?
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, our debt right now is what, $1.2 trillion, and the deficit, is growing exponentially. Brian, MPs have been opening the daily session of Parliament with a word of prayer since 1877. But you're telling me now the Bloc Québécois brought forth a motion to do away with the practice?
Yes, it's a Bloc MP. I believe his name is Martin Champoux. My apologies, I'm going off memory here. He's put forward a motion saying he wants to get rid of it. That says that it's a Christian prayer and we're supposed to respect all faiths. Quite frankly, I'm shocked that it took this long for this to happen. It's more than a decade ago that they attempted to stop reciting the Lord's Prayer to open the Ontario legislature. That was actually much more open and accessible, and people saw it. Most people, and I worked on Parliament Hill for more than a decade, most people wouldn't know that there was a prayer ever said. It's very quick. Now, the other parties, they're going to be debating this today, then they'll vote on the motion. Liberal House Leader Mark Holland, obviously sensitive to this, said, well, if MPs vote to remove the prayer, we will put in a moment of silent meditation at the beginning so people can say their own prayer. It would be quite the move for Parliament to get rid of this. Now, I know people want to say that we have a separation of church and state. We don't in Canada. The Queen is our head of state. She is also the head of the Anglican Church. On the back of all of your coins, it says DG Regina, Queen by the grace of God. That's what that means in Latin. And you go around Parliament, you remember this from your time there, how the number of times that you find scripture inscribed into the wall or symbolism, it's there. But like I said, I'm surprised it took this long for it to happen. It's probably going to pass, but could be surprised, and we might see that people say, no, let's just leave well enough alone and not anger a whole pile of people across the country.
Brian, the Roe versus Wade abortion debate from the United States continues to find its way here into Canada, into Canadian politics. But you don't think that there's potential for laws to change here? Why not?
Because the different way that Roe v. Wade came about versus the Morgentaler decision, Roe v. Wade was a very strange judicial decision. Morgentaler struck down an existing abortion law in Canada. The court didn't say there's a right to an abortion. Or they didn't say there's a women's right to choose. That's an American import. What they said was the previous law was too onerous. And if Parliament wants to bring forward another law, then they can do so. And of course, if you recall, the Mulroney Conservatives did try to pass an abortion law, and it failed, not because it was actually a coalition of those opposed to there being any law and a coalition of those who said the law wasn't strong enough. That's why we have no law. It was the pro-lifers and the pro-abortionists getting together to kill off the law that would have had some restrictions in place. So we haven't had a law since. There simply aren't enough MPs in Parliament who are willing to step forward and vote for a law that would change abortion access in Canada. And so even if one came forward, it's not there. The judicial decision of Morgentaler isn't one that can be struck down. Roe v. Wade said there's a right to an abortion. It looks like the court's going to say no and send it back to states' rights. So it's just a very different situation here. But politicians on both sides of this issue, but especially Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberal Party, are trying to use it to drum up support and beat a political drum for their own gain here in this country, even though they know exactly what I've just told you, that the situation is completely different.
Now, you've written about how Canadians may be hypocritical when it comes to abortion and the use of private health clinics. Can you explain?
We have a health system that is struggling to give people life-saving, life-enhancing surgeries. Think about how long the wait is for a knee or a hip operation. And people will say, well, that's just elective surgery. You know what elective surgery is, Hal? The definition is anything that's scheduled. So you're having a heart operation, unless you're having a heart attack right now, if it's scheduled for next week, that's an elective surgery. We have people waiting in pain, losing their mobility, losing their ability to go out, get exercise. What happens when you lose your mobility? All your other health conditions go down. So things like knees and hips that give you that mobility back, that give you that quality of life back, are very important, but people are waiting. Those are all surgeries that could be done in private clinics, and outside of Quebec, it doesn't really happen. And any government that tries to do it is shut down. Give you an example. The Saskatchewan government was threatened with losing funding through the Canada Health Transfer for using private MRI clinics to reduce a backlog due to COVID. That same summer, Justin Trudeau punished New Brunswick by withholding money through the Canada Health Transfer. Why? Because they wouldn't fund a private abortion clinic. We fund private abortion clinics in Toronto, straight across the country, in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where the Prime Minister held back funds. The closest medical facility to Parliament Hill is the private Morgentaler abortion clinic just around the corner. We allow private clinics for abortion, but we somehow feel that if we allow them for these other surgeries, the health system will collapse. Those are not, ideas that you can hold in your head at the same time and be congruent in any way, shape, or form.
Brian, we had another member of Parliament join Parliament via Zoom in an inappropriate way last week. Can you explain?
Yes. I believe his name is Shafkat Ali. He's MP for Brampton Centre. He is a little red-faced, you might say, at the moment. Decided to join Parliament through Zoom, but then took his device, whatever he was on, I'm going to assume a phone or a mobile device of some sort, into the washroom. So in some ways, as a friend of mine, Bill Carroll, said on radio, that this is progress, because before they would just get naked or pee into a cup. He's going to the bathroom this time. This has got to stop. This is an embarrassment for the country. It's all three times it's been a Liberal. Maybe House Leader Mark Holland should sit them all down and have a conversation. Look, all of us have been on Zoom calls and Teams calls and all of these things way too much. If you got to go, you got to go. Just turn off the system or leave. Don't take it with you. Nobody needs that.
Absolutely, that's right. Quite disrespectful for Parliament. Brian, a lot of water cooler chat last week was how Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, used profanity in the House of Commons, but you say the bigger issue is what they were discussing at the time.
He was being questioned on the issue of whether a satellite plane, or sorry, a spy plane had been going over the Freedom Convoy protests in late January and early to mid-February. And a number of Conservative MPs said they heard him use a profanity. There was a lot of furor in the House. I can tell you that from reviewing the audio, you couldn't hear it. So they said they heard it. It wasn't picked up by the microphones. The speaker just said, "We don't know." A lot of back and forth on that. He probably used a profanity just like his father did before. We know he doesn't have a strong track record of showing respect in Parliament, nor do other Liberal MPs who go to the bathroom in the middle of a session. But the bigger issue is this spy plane this military spy plane going over the freedom protest, because As Conservative MP Cheryl Gallant pointed out, there would have to be specific legal authorization for that. Now, the government's claim is it was just a training mission. Okay, that still leads to the question of, did you collect information? Did you pass it on to the government, to the police? Having the military spy on its citizens engaged in protest is not something that we want to go down. And this started in early January before it was ever declared illegal, before the Emergencies Act. This is problematic. Trudeau just simply called it disinformation. It's true. The military has confirmed that it happened, but he has time and again called stories he doesn't like disinformation, while also putting forward legislation where he gets to decide how to regulate the internet and disinformation. That's a dangerous situation for this country to be in, where the government can declare a story they don't like disinformation, then try and get it banned. That's not a free and open society, and that's not what Justin Trudeau was elected on in any of the times he's gone to the people to ask for their vote.
Brian, the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race will see the first official party debate tomorrow in Edmonton with all 6 candidates on board. Now, you wrote that you were not too impressed by the debate last week. Why is that?
It was a bit of a free-for-all. Look, I want to give the Canada Free and Strong networking conference kudos for organizing it. I know it's not tough to organize those sorts of things, and I think they did well. But there were times when, if you were new to the Conservative Party, if you're one of the many Canadians who doesn't like what's going on in the country and thought, I'm going to check this out. I'm going to look at what the Conservatives are about because this Trudeau guy's not doing it for me. If this was your introduction to the Conservative Party, you would have seen people yelling at each other, calling each other names, interrupting each other constantly. It could make for entertaining viewing, but if that's your introduction, you were probably going to change the channel, leave, not come back, and not be interested in what they had to say. Leslyn Lewis and Pierre Poilievre went at it at various times. Pierre Poilievre and Jean Charest went at it at various times. I think it was 20 times that Poilievre asked a question, but then interrupted Charest as he's answering it and just kept saying, what's the number? What's the number? If you're into, elbows up, knuckles out fight, then that's great. If you're trying to win government, that's not great. And I've told you, and I've told radio hosts and TV hosts across the country when I've talked to them about Pierre Poilievre, this caricature that the Liberals try and paint of him, of an angry, chippy man, is not the man that I know. He's not the man who's shown up at his rallies, but he's the man who showed up on stage. And I thought that was a really bad play for Pierre, because he's going to have to fight against that caricature when the Liberals put it out there. Don't play into what your opponent wants to describe you as if you want to win.
Now, 2 of the would-be candidates who were disqualified from running for the leadership of the CPC have settled their appeals with the Conservative Party, but a third wants the rules to change. Tell me more.
Yeah, so Joseph Bourgault is a Saskatoon businessman, and Jolie Etienne, a Toronto lawyer, both tried to run. They were turned down. They appealed. They had a discussion with the party. They didn't, they thought they had the right amount of money in. They thought they had the right amount of signatures. They vet all these things to make sure the signatures are legit, that the people are allowed to, sign on to this. They check the donations to make sure they're legal. At the end, those 2 candidates said, all right, I won't challenge this anymore. Grant Abraham, who's from British Columbia, used to be involved in British politics. He's Canadian, I think originally from Calgary, in BC now, but he's been involved in British Conservative politics. He wants to run. He was $33,000 short because the party found that he had ineligible donations. So either people weren't legal to donate to a political party, they'd gone over their donation limit, whatever the case may be, couldn't do it. He also said he didn't know that the party was going to be taxing candidates and therefore didn't put in more money. The party's been clear that they are taxing the donations made to candidates. What that means is they take a portion because they have to process all of these. That costs money. And the Conservative Party has lost money on the last 2 leadership races, millions of dollars. They said, we can't afford to do that again. So we're changing the way we're doing it. And the campaigns will help fund the leadership race they want to be in. Abraham said, I didn't know about that. Everybody knew about that. That was his mistake. And also apparently he was short on signatures as well. He's asking for the party to make an exception. I don't see how they can, given what happened with Bourgault and Etienne. He's saying this is about democracy. Well, In democracy, we all know what the rules are, and you agree to play by the rules, you agree to follow them. And if you don't meet the threshold, if you can't get 500 signatures and you can't raise $300,000, you're probably not going to be a serious candidate. This guy has an interesting resume. I'd like to see him in working on the conservative movement and running later, but now's just not the time for him.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.